She walked through the gates of Heartland like a ghost from the past, stronger, older, and hiding something in her eyes. No one expected to see Georgie again, but now that she's back, everything is about to change. When Georgie left Heartland, she left behind more than just a ranch. She left behind a family, a horse that loved her deeply, and fans who watched her grow from a rebellious teenager into a strong competitor. Her absence in the recent seasons of Heartland was felt like a missing heartbeat. While Amy continued to train horses and Lou focused on her career and family, there was always a silent space where Georgie used to be. No one filled that space. No one could. So when season 19 teased her return, fans were left speechless and deeply emotional. The show didn't give it away easily. The early trailers showed quick flashes: a girl in the distance, someone watching from the hilltop, a rider silhouetted at dawn. For a moment, the viewers wondered if it was just a memory, a flashback, or a dream. But it wasn't. When the doors to the barn opened and Georgie stood there, mature and changed, it was real. Her eyes weren't full of fire like before. They were thoughtful, cautious, and carrying years of stories untold. Jack was the first to notice. His old eyes watched her closely, unsure whether to rush forward or wait for her to speak first. Amy stood frozen. She had imagined this moment so many times, but the real thing hit harder than she thought. Georgie didn't come back with big words or a dramatic entrance. She simply walked up to Phoenix, her beloved horse, and placed her hand on his side. That one touch said more than any greeting ever could. Phoenix, who had become quieter over the years, let out a soft breath as if he knew his rider had returned. Amy's voice finally broke the silence, calling her name with disbelief and hope wrapped together. Lou stepped out from the house, unsure if this was a dream, and Katie, now growing into her own, stood at the porch, watching this mysterious homecoming unfold. But even in that emotional moment, everyone knew this wasn't going to be easy. Time had passed, people had changed, and Georgie, well, she wasn't the same girl who left Heartland. She had seen the world. She had tasted fame, struggled with pressure, and dealt with heartbreak. Her return wasn't just for a visit. Something brought her back, something important. And that mystery, hidden behind her quiet eyes, would soon shake the foundations of everything Heartland thought it knew. This moment wasn't just about one character returning. It was a symbol of Heartland's strength, the idea that no matter how far you go or how long you stay away, there is always a way back home. Fans felt it deeply. Social media exploded with reactions, edits, and emotional tributes to Georgie's journey. Some were crying, some were celebrating, but all of them had one thought in common: Georgie's comeback is not just a storyline. It's a new beginning. She left chasing greatness, but what the world didn't see were the bruises beneath. Her medals, the loneliness behind her victories, and the silent battles that nearly broke her. Georgie wasn't just gone, she was lost. When Georgie made the decision to leave Heartland, it seemed like the perfect next step. She was young, driven, and one of the brightest talents in the show-jumping world. Her connection with Phoenix was unmatched, and her ambition to become a champion burned brightly. Europe offered everything: elite training, sponsorships, world-class competition. But while Heartland fans watched from afar, seeing her name rise in rankings and hearing about her successes, few knew the truth behind those headlines. Georgie's life away from the ranch started with excitement. The arenas were bigger, the stakes higher, and the attention constant. She traveled from country to country, rarely staying in one place long enough to feel at home. The freedom she once craved quickly turned into isolation. She missed the quiet mornings at the ranch, the smell of fresh hay, Jack's steady presence, Amy's advice, and even the silly arguments with Katie. Fame and pressure soon became her new family, and they weren't kind. In one of the biggest competitions of her career, Georgie fell literally and emotionally. A serious fall during a show-jumping event left her with a fractured collarbone and a bruised spirit. But worse than the pain was the silence that followed. Sponsors pulled back, her coach grew distant, and even the media that once praised her now questioned if she had peaked too soon. Alone in a foreign city, stuck in a hospital bed, Georgie had no one, not even Phoenix, who had been left behind due to travel rules. It was during those long nights filled with painkillers, regrets, and tear-streaked pillows that Georgie started thinking about Heartland again. Not the competitions or the pressure, but the family dinners, the way Amy always knew what a horse needed, how Jack fixed things without saying much, and how Phoenix would nudge her shoulder to say you're okay even when she wasn't. Those memories weren't just nostalgia, they were lifelines. She tried to push them away. She convinced herself that going back would be failure, that the world would see her return as giving up. But the truth was, Georgie didn't need more trophies, she needed healing. And healing couldn't be found on podiums or in expensive stables. It was buried in the soil of Heartland. It was in the way Amy whispered to horses, in the quiet strength of Jack, in Lou's tough love, and in the rhythm of home. What finally broke her wasn't a fall, but a moment of silence after a win. She had just placed first in a small event, her comeback win, and as she held the ribbon in her hands, the crowd clapping, cameras flashing, she felt nothing. No joy, no pride, just emptiness. That night, she packed her things without telling anyone. No press statement, no goodbye posts. She booked a flight, one way to Alberta. She didn't know how the family would react. She didn't know if Heartland would even feel like home anymore. But she knew one thing for sure. She had to find herself again. And there was only one place in the world that ever made her feel whole. The moment Georgie stepped onto the ranch, the wind seemed to pause. But while Phoenix neighed softly in recognition, not everyone reacted with the same warmth. Amy, standing by the paddock, had 1,000 questions in her eyes but held them back. She approached slowly, cautiously, as if afraid that speaking too soon might shatter the moment. Georgie gave her a weak smile, one that tried to hide everything she had been through. The hug between them wasn't immediate. It came after a few seconds of silence, the kind that holds years of distance and pain. When they finally embraced, it was tight, trembling, and unfinished, like the beginning of a conversation left hanging for too long. Lou, on the other hand, was different. As soon as she saw Georgie, her face turned unreadable. She didn't run out with open arms or tearful joy. She stood on the porch, arms folded, watching like a mother, unsure whether to be relieved or angry. For Lou, Georgie had always been family, but she had also been responsible for a lot of worry. When she finally walked down the steps, her voice was calm but firm. "Why now?" she asked. Georgie didn't answer right away. There were no right words. How do you explain that even when surrounded by people, you felt utterly alone? How do you tell the people you love that you ran away not from them but from yourself? Jack, steady as ever, didn't ask questions. He walked up, tipped his hat slightly, and gave Georgie a look that said more than words. It was the look of someone who had seen broken things return and who knew healing didn't come fast. He didn't hug her. He didn't need to. Just his presence made it easier for her to breathe again. And Katie was no longer the little girl Georgie remembered. She had grown, not just in height but in personality. Katie's expression was difficult to read. There was admiration, yes, but also hesitation. She had grown into her own space in the family, and now Georgie's return brought back shadows. Then came the moment Georgie saw Quinn again. She hadn't told him she was coming. The last they spoke, things were tense and unfinished. He had supported her for a long time, but distance and ambition had pulled them apart. When their eyes met, it was like time froze between them. Neither smiled, neither moved. There was just silence, a silence that carried heartbreak, questions, and maybe a sliver of hope. They didn't speak much that day. Just a brief exchange of glances and a soft hey that meant more than any long explanation ever could. Dinner that night was quiet. The family tried to act normal, but every glance toward Georgie was filled with curiosity and concern. She barely touched her plate. The clinking of forks and the sound of the wind outside did most of the talking. It was Katie who finally broke the silence. "So, are you staying?" Georgie looked around the table, her eyes meeting each of theirs. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to scream it. But the truth was she wasn't sure yet. All she could whisper was, "I don't know." That answer hit harder than expected, because everyone at that table knew what it really meant. Georgie was home, but her heart was still halfway across the world, stuck in a place between dreams and regrets. And unless something changed, she might vanish again. This wasn't the warm family reunion many hoped for. It was awkward, quiet, and full of emotional landmines. But still, it was a start. A fragile, uncertain, but honest start. And sometimes, that's all you need. Phoenix stood in the middle of the paddock, unmoving, eyes fixed on Georgie like he'd been waiting for her every single day since she left. He didn't bolt toward her or make a dramatic run across the field. Instead, he took one step, then another, slow, careful, like he wasn't sure if she was real. Georgie didn't rush to him either. She waited, tears already brimming in her eyes. When they finally met halfway, she raised her hand, fingers trembling, and touched his mane. The moment their skin met, Phoenix let out a long, low breath and pressed his head against her chest. No one watching could speak. Even the wind seemed to stop. It had been years. He had been ridden by others, cared for by Amy and the ranch hands. But no one could replace Georgie. No one shared his rhythm, his moods, or his fire the way she did. And now that she was back, it was as if he found the piece he didn't know he'd been missing. For Georgie, touching Phoenix again was like breathing after holding your breath too long. She leaned into him, whispered his name, and he nuzzled her neck like old times, like nothing had changed, even though everything had. Amy watched from a distance, not interfering. She knew better than to step into a moment like that. She had seen countless reunions, but this one carried a different kind of weight. Phoenix was more than just a horse, he was Georgie's mirror. And now, looking at how careful he moved, how he seemed older, slower, Amy realized something. Georgie hadn't just come back to see them. She came back to heal. And Phoenix was going to be the first step. Later that day, Georgie asked Amy if she could ride again. Not in the arena, not for training, just a simple ride through the hills like they used to do when she needed to think. Amy didn't say much, just nodded and saddled up Phoenix quietly. Georgie mounted slowly, unsure if the strength in her legs was the same. But once in the saddle, it was like her body remembered. Not the fame, not the pressure, just the feeling of being one with her horse. They rode out slowly, the sun dipping low behind them, casting gold across the field. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it was pure, and it was enough. That ride didn't end in applause. There were no judges, no crowds, just a quiet dismount, a long hug to Phoenix, and a whispered promise. I missed this. I missed you. Amy, who had followed on horseback, finally rode up beside her. They didn't say much, but in the silence between them, something shifted. They were rebuilding trust, not just as family, but as horsewomen who understood that riding isn't about winning, it's about connecting. That night, word spread around the ranch. Georgie's riding again. Some were excited, some cautious, and a few wondered if this meant she'd return to competition. But Georgie wasn't thinking that far ahead. Her mind wasn't on medals or sponsors. It was on a moment, just one quiet, beautiful moment where she and Phoenix had found each other again. But dreams have a way of returning when you least expect them. The very next morning, Lou received a call from a major show jumping event. They had heard Georgie was back and wanted to offer her a wild card spot. An invite-only return. Amy overheard, and her heart dropped. Would Georgie leave again? Would this just be another short visit before the world came calling? Georgie stood outside the house, looking at the distant mountains, the warm barn lights, and Phoenix resting peacefully. Her name was being whispered again in circles she thought she had left behind. The question now wasn't whether she could ride. It was whether she wanted to, truly wanted to, for herself, not for the world. And somewhere deep inside, she wasn't sure of the answer yet. Georgie stood alone at Ty's grave, her arms folded tightly across her chest as if holding herself together. The stone was cold, plain, and quiet, just like Ty had always been. He wasn't the type for grand speeches or loud presence, but his silence had always meant something. She stared at the name, the dates, the small carving of a horse at the bottom. For a long time, she said nothing. No one was around, just her, the wind, and the sound of leaves rustling like whispers from the past. I thought I knew what I was doing, she finally said. Her voice cracked, even though she tried to sound strong. I left thinking it would make you proud, that if I became someone big out there, it would make sense why I walked away from all this. Her fingers brushed the edge of the stone. But it didn't make sense. None of it did. A tear rolled down her cheek, and she didn't bother wiping it. She let it fall. She let them all fall. Ty had believed in her more than anyone, even when she didn't believe in herself. That's what hurt the most. She had gone out into the world carrying that belief like armor, thinking it would protect her. But fame didn't feel like pride, it felt like pressure. Crowds didn't feel like support, they felt like noise. And when everything crashed, when she had no one to call, she realized that the only people who had ever truly seen her were right here. Later, Amy found her there. She didn't say anything right away. She just walked up beside Georgie and stood still. That was the thing about Amy, she knew when words weren't needed. Georgie spoke first. I thought if I came back, I'd feel okay again. But I don't. I feel like a stranger. Like this place kept moving without me, and I don't know where I fit anymore. Amy finally looked at her and replied softly, you don't need to fit in right away. This place doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be honest. That was the hardest part. Being honest. Georgie had always been strong, brave, the one who pushed through injuries, who faced down fear on horseback, who never let anyone see her cry. But now, she admitted what she hadn't said out loud to anyone. I'm scared, Amy. I'm scared I'm not good enough anymore. I'm scared I lost what made me special. I don't know if I can do this. Amy touched her shoulder. You don't have to prove anything. Not to us. Not even to yourself. You've already come home, that's the hardest part. Back at the house, Jack was fixing a broken gate hinge when Georgie returned. He didn't say anything. He just handed her a wrench. It was his way of letting her know she still belonged. Not because of what she could do, but because of who she was. She knelt down beside him, took the wrench, and tightened the bolt. Later that evening, she sat on the porch alone, the sky turning pink with the setting sun. Lou stepped out, holding 2 mugs of hot tea, and offered one without a word. They sat together in silence for a while before Lou finally spoke. You don't have to be who you were. You can be someone new, someone better, but only if you stop running. Georgie took a deep breath. For the first time since coming back, she felt like maybe she could stop pretending. Maybe it was okay to not have it all figured out. Maybe it was okay to be a little broken, because broken things can be rebuilt. And at Heartland, even the most lost souls find their way back if they're brave enough to stay. The next morning, the barn doors creaked open just as the sun lit the frost-covered fences. Georgie stood there, pulling her gloves tight, her breath visible in the cold air. Amy was already inside, brushing down a nervous young colt. He wasn't eating. He wasn't letting anyone near. He had been through something, transport trauma, maybe, or abuse. His eyes darted at every sound, his hooves pacing endlessly in place. Most handlers had given up, but Amy turned to Georgie and simply said, "Want to try?" Without a word, Georgie stepped forward. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She simply stood close enough for the colt to feel her presence, but far enough not to be a threat. Minutes passed. Then she slowly crouched, letting the silence settle around them. Her eyes stayed soft, focused, and steady. The colt paused. He sniffed the air, snorted, and then very slowly stepped forward. Just one hoof. Just enough to show he was curious, not afraid. Amy watched, quiet but impressed. The Georgie who had left was a rider. The Georgie who returned was becoming something deeper, a listener, a healer, not just of horses, but of herself. That morning, the colt let Georgie touch his nose. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start something. Later, Jack found Georgie fixing a broken fence on the south end. She had a hammer in one hand and a smile she didn't know she was wearing. "Back to work already?" he asked, half grinning. She shrugged. "Feels good." Jack nodded, walking past her, leaving behind a single sentence that stuck. "It suits you, being home." Meanwhile, Quinn was still figuring out where they stood. He hadn't pushed. He hadn't pried. But one afternoon, he approached her by the creek, where they used to sit and dream about the future. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. She looked at him, unsure what it even meant. "The shows? The travel? The pressure?" "I miss you," he clarified. Georgie didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Their talk wasn't perfect. It was filled with pauses, with maybes and I don't knows. But for the first time, they were honest. No roles to play, no image to uphold. Just two people standing in the same place after walking very different roads. And maybe that was enough for now. By the end of the week, Lou handed Georgie a folder. "What's this?" Georgie asked, flipping through the pages. It was a plan, a proposal to co-manage a small training program under the Heartland name. A program for young riders with rescue horses. Lou had already secured local support. "It's yours, if you want it," she said. Georgie blinked in disbelief. "You trust me with this?" Lou smiled. "I've always trusted you. You just stopped trusting yourself." Georgie spent the night staring at the stars, Phoenix resting beside her. She thought of all the places she had been, all the awards she'd won. And none of them made her feel the way this did. She didn't need to run anymore. She didn't need the spotlight. Here, surrounded by wood fences, stubborn family members, and a horse who never gave up on her, she felt seen. She wasn't just riding again. She was living again. And Heartland wasn't just a place on a map, it was her anchor, her proving ground. And now, her future. The ranch was quiet, blanketed in the golden light of early evening. Georgie stood at the edge of the paddock, arms resting on the fence, watching a group of kids try to calm a jittery rescue pony. They were awkward, loud, clumsy, but determined. She smiled. It reminded her of herself years ago, wild with energy and carrying pain she didn't know how to name. She had come full circle, but she wasn't the same girl anymore. She wasn't even the same rider. She was something new, something stronger, quieter, and more rooted. Word had already spread through the community. Georgie Fleming Morris was staying. Not for a few weeks, not just for a break. She was building something new right here at Heartland. A training program for riders who didn't come from money or status. Kids who had struggled. Kids who had been overlooked. She saw herself in each of them, and she gave them what she had once been given, a chance. But change wasn't just happening on the ranch. The world outside was knocking again. An international show committee had caught wind of Georgie's low-key return. They sent a scout to watch her ride. Just one clean jump with Phoenix, and suddenly, the offers returned bigger than before. A chance to go back. To win. To shine. Amy sat across from her at the kitchen table the night the invitation arrived. The letter sat between them, unopened. "What are you thinking?" Amy asked. Georgie ran her fingers along the envelope. "I don't know," she whispered. "Part of me misses it. The rush, the noise. But here, I feel peace." "I never had that out there," Amy nodded. "You don't have to decide now. But whatever you choose, make sure it's for you this time. Not for the crowd, not for the pressure. For you." Georgie didn't open the envelope that night. Instead, the next day, she got up early and rode Phoenix bareback into the hills. The air was crisp, and the sky wide open. They moved like one being, their bond tighter than ever. She didn't need a crowd to feel powerful. She didn't need applause to feel alive. This ride, free, silent, real, was everything. When she returned, Quinn was waiting at the barn. He held the envelope out. "Still want me to burn it?" he joked gently. Georgie took it, looked at it for a long moment, and smiled. "No," she said. "I think I'll keep it, but I'm not leaving." She tucked it into a drawer in the tack room, unopened. A reminder not of what she could chase, but of what she had chosen. And with that choice, something shifted, not just for Georgie, but for the whole ranch. Amy looked lighter. Jack walked with a quiet pride. Lou's sharp edges softened. Even Katie began to see Georgie not as competition, but as inspiration. Fans around the world reacted with joy and surprise. Social media flooded with clips of Georgie's quiet return, her emotional rides, and her work with young horses. It wasn't the kind of comeback filled with flashing lights or TV interviews. It was something deeper, more honest, and far more powerful. Georgie's story wasn't just about returning, it was about rising, not to fame, not to trophies, but to herself. Heartland Season 19 didn't just give fans a reunion. It gave them something rare, a character who didn't just come back. She became. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to chase the world, it's to come home and rebuild it with your own hands.